before we go, obviously.
Yeah.
And we've got Phil joining us as well, I think.
Yeah. You cat in the background.
Right, that's up. Excellent. Right, so. Hi,
Good
Aaron.
evening, chaps.
Good evening.
Hello.
Have we all calmed down?
I'm trying to. I just had the cat ripping down my green screen, but
This is always the way.
literally pulled it down. So I'm a bit stressed, but hey ho, it's fine. Right.
Is that going to be the right way around? That is not the right way around. So if I do that.
Oh, nice wallpaper, Tom.
Oh,
Now I need one of these fancy wallpapers.
I didn't do it. Tilla did it, and I just said, "Can you send it to me?"
Tom always has interesting. It's usually Melbourne.
Well, I was going to say, yeah.
Canada turn the first couple turns at Canada, and then Aaron and I are sitting at home.
Well,
There's nothing wrong with that. I've only got it because I have people. Like we're live, by the way. I only have it because people walk past in towels because I have the stairs behind me. So, right.
Well, the cat will walk in, and then we'll forget that it is turn 2 at Canada. So.
No doubt. That's all. Right.
So you're not gonna give me Max Verstappen, right? Because this show would go off the rails immediately if that happened.
just mute you, fellas. All good.
Good advice. Right. Just bear with. We may be a couple of minutes late going up.
No problem. I'm glad I had clothes to fold after all of that. I needed that. I've never been so. That's some race. I've never been through a Formula One race like that ever. I don't know. Other than probably for me and my personal bias, I think it was Brazil 08. Had that kind of anxiety for different reasons, but that was too much. There was way too much that happened in that race.
There's a lot to dissect, both on and off the track.
It's not a good look for Formula One. Not just where they were racing. It's not a good look for Michael Massey.
Oh,
it's not a good look for either of the guys that are battling for this world championship.
No,
and I'm personally a fan of one of those guys, and it wasn't good. But
I'm
at the.
Sorry, Phil. Good.
No, you're good.
Verstappen. Offense. Oh, no, that's just leaving the track and gaining an advantage. That's fine. We knew that anyway.
I think this race is a bit of a Bernie Ecclestone dream, isn't it? Literally,
Hamilton,
and it happened.
Yeah. Hamilton has also been summoned to the stewards.
No surprises there.
Yeah, it's the same one as Max.
They want to hear both their accounts.
Yeah.
There'll be all kinds of data and stuff they'll be going through as well.
Oh, yeah.
Right. That's that done.
I'm trying to think.
Max said in his interview with Sky that he was downshifting and braking. So, I mean, he might say braking and it's like a dab with the brakes before Lewis gets there, but the fact that he's used that word.
So if he's using that word, he's implicating himself for no reason.
Exactly.
Because he could have just went and said,
I'm slowing down.
I'm slowing down. I decelerated 5 gears. Now, I mean, we can't even, there's too much to dissect with that because you have a world champion trying to dissect it, and Paul di Resta and Ant were all trying to do it, and they were having a hard time with it. They're way more, they're way bigger experts than any of us will ever be. But a world champion didn't even know what to say about that. And he's been in that situation before too, to be fair.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as like turn 4. I mean, in a way it's like turn 4 at Brazil, but they didn't have the camera view conveniently. Like, did he make the corner or not? Nobody knows. But in the end, it worked out the way that it did. Whoever's going to be on whatever side in this thing, and they're going to say that he got a 5. In the end, I found it weird that the stewards didn't really play much of a role in this race. It was all about Massey. It was all about Massey in this race. We never heard the steward, and there was no steward decisions of any great significance. And then randomly they threw the 5-second penalty there. And it was almost like they were covering their ass because it had gotten out of hand and they didn't know what to do anymore. Like that's literally all that was. Now at the same time, and then Max's tires went off conveniently too. But
he was always going to have that on.
Yeah,
he was on the mediums, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was on the mediums.
They were never going to make it to the end, even with the amount of virtual safety cars and all the rest of it. What we had, I mean, they were never going to make it to the
end. And it could have been over a lot earlier because they waited after that last full safety car. I think they waited about 6 laps after to bring up DRS. It seemed in an inordinately long time. I'd never remembered a full safety car and then having because it's usually 3 laps. It's usually on the 3rd lap it comes back. So I'm like, okay, fine. I think they went 3-4 laps. Lewis had made a move or had gotten to within DRS range going into the final corner to get that DRS. He was at 7/10, and they still hadn't shut on DRS. I'm like, I don't know. There's so much here. It's insane. I mean, but hey, the points battle is tied. I think we're gonna it's gonna end up like Japan 89 or 90, but it's gonna be it's a tie battle. But
whoever wins next week wins the championship. That's it.
Or if they make it to the
if they make it to Turn 1.
If they don't if they make it to the end of that first straight, like that second, because now they've changed out that chicane or whatever. So now they're going to get through that S section. If they make it out of that corner, then we might have a race. I mean, there will be a race. Now, whether Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen are involved in it, I don't know. But it's going to, I'll tell you.
Just trailing home like 10th and 11th. Or trying to trade the fastest lap point.
Yeah, and then they'll get stuck in a DRS train with like
imagine
Aston Martin.
Imagine if Hamilton came home 9th, but Verstappen came home 10th and took the fastest lap. Verstappen would win because he had won more championships.
No, he'd have one more point anyway. He'd be 2-2. Oh no, it's 2-2, but he had one more.
He would win on number of wins if they tied on points as well.
Yeah, but somehow I don't think it's going to get to that.
No, I don't think so.
I'll put anything past this championship. It's just a year that keeps on giving.
It is. I cannot believe we are in December and we are neck and neck on points. I
can't believe we're racing in December. It's lunacy.
It feels wrong.
Yeah, it's too much. That's also too much.
It's too much for the teams.
Oh yeah.
It's like if you think about how long they've been on the road, how long they've been away from their families.
And they've got to do it all again next year. They've got 23 races from March to the middle of November.
Yeah.
It's going to be more condensed, but still it's sad. I mean, they do it here with NASCAR. They do 36 races from February to the start of November. So it's a bit, but they get like a couple of off weeks here and there, but really it's not much better. So.
Right, guys, we'll get going in a minute. I'm just finishing up some final stuff.
No problem.
Cool. How is everyone?
I'm better than I was about a half an hour ago. or an hour ago. I think I was going to have a heart attack. I thought I was going to have a heart attack at some point there. I thought I was going to destroy my TV. And then I was sweating like an old lady at church. It was that much. It was so much. And then I had to fold my clothes. If I didn't have to go down and do the laundry, I don't know what I would have done because I always watch the post-race stuff. And this is like the first race that I can remember in a long time. Lewis won. And I didn't even want to watch this because I didn't want to watch all these replays because it just gets me angry again.
Did you see Hamilton after when he was sitting down that sort of like little gully thing?
Yeah.
When he was just like mopping his head, he looked just exhausted.
Yeah, this is the most intense it's ever been for him. even more than Massa. Other than, to be fair, the Rosberg thing was at this level.
Yeah, I think this is worse than Rosberg in terms of.
Oh yeah,
pressure.
I mean, they don't like each other.
Gone to a point. Go on, Phil.
Yeah, they just don't like each other, and it's opposite teams, and there's no control. At least with I'm forgetting the old the late race director Charlie Whiting. Even he couldn't. I mean, he basically got out of the way of Lewis and Nico doing whatever the hell they were going to do to each other.
He just let them crack on. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
He just handed it over to the team, didn't he?
Yeah.
They're your drivers. Police them.
Right. Speaking of cracking on, should we crack on with this podcast then?
Go on then.
Yeah, let's do it.
I need to remember to save to cloud, unlike last time I did this.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see how this goes. I'm quite nervous about the start of this, to be honest, because I'm doing something quite audacious. It's either going to crash. It's either going to crash and burn or be hilarious. So.
Oh shit! Here we go.
Let's see what happens.
Are you gonna?
Oh, that's a ballsy move recording.
Yeah.
With the festive season fast approaching, the inaugural Saudi Arabian Grand Prix gave us, among other things, 5 VSCs, 4 DNFs, 3 standing starts, 2 safety cars, and a 5-second penalty. Welcome to the Grid Talk podcast. This is episode 158, where we will bring you a review of the 2021 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. I'm your host, Tom Horrox, and I'm joined with Aaron Harper from the 5 Red Lights podcast.
Hi, guys.
Philip Mathew from the Grip Strip podcast.
Hello.
And the man with the best name in podcasting, it's Everything F1's Tom Downey.
Hello.
Welcome, everyone. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube and click the bell to be notified when we're going live. And don't forget to give us a thumbs up. If you enjoy our show, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and we'll give you a shout out to say thank you. Thank you very much. And we've also got some competitions going as well, so you can be entered into one of our 3 competitions. You can have a chance of winning free merch at the store. All you need to do is subscribe to YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, comment on the video proper, not the live stream, or give us a 5-star review on iTunes, and you'll have a chance to win something from our merch store. You can also see what's on offer on our merch store by going to f1chronicle.com/store. So after a race that ended in Ham ver Bots, it's just pretty straightforward race, really, wasn't it? I'm going to go to Phil first to talk about the performance and Lewis Hamilton still technically behind Max in the championship, but 3 wins in a row means he's got a great chance of seeing out the title in Abu Dhabi. How did you see his race, Phil?
I mean, the initial start was good, and he was able to get ahead of Bottas and control the race for the first, 10 laps of the race before Mick's unfortunate incident in 21 and 22. From there is when, the race really started. For all that went on, for which there's many layers to this thing, and I don't think we have enough time on this podcast to really get into all of them, or maybe we will. I'm going to keep it simple in that Lewis had been able to win the pole, and I think on at least one of the 84 different starts and restarts, or 2, 3, or 4 of them, he had been faster on pace than Max Verstappen. And in the end, he pulled away from Max Verstappen when Verstappen's tires went away. So, I mean, it makes this points battle. It's a dead heat theoretically, with the caveat that Max has one more win this season. All those fastest lap points, who knew that the fastest lap point would actually make such a big difference in Formula One? Well, it has. And it's leaving this a tie game going into Abu Dhabi, which makes a race that has generally been one of the more boring, DRS train kind of races into one of the more epic fights that we'll ever have had in the history of Formula One, not only in my lifetime, but in general. First time it's been tied, they said on the broadcast, since Emerson the great Emerson Fittipaldi and Clay Regazzoni in 1974, which is pretty insane. And there was way different points and way less races than they have here. So Lewis going out there, getting that win, damage on the car, all the other stuff that happened there, all the things that went on during this race. It was a performance that was necessary. It was a performance that you would expect from the man that is a 7-time world champion and now with 103 wins, Tom. And now we'll see if he'll be able to get 104 and possibly get that historic 8th world championship after Max Verstappen generally has been the better car most of this year. But I think Red Bull and Max Verstappen are going to have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, I couldn't said it any better myself. And we'll go to Tom Downey next for his boy, Mr. Verstappen. The stewards giveth and they taketh away. What did you make of his tyre choice today, and indeed his driving standards? Defend your boy.
Well, nice to see you really neutral, Tom. Oh God, where do we begin? First of all, the decision by Red Bull to go aggressive with the medium tyre choice. I understand why they did it, because track position around Saudi, as we saw, is pretty crucial. But he was always going to have to get those tyres off. And yes, we had 2 red flags, but the sort of possibility of having a third, I think, was dwindling quite fast as cars were sort of retiring left, right, and centre. You know, it turned into, at one point, I think it turned into the F1 Hunger Games, because it was, people were sort of dropping out everywhere. So in terms of tyre choice, it was very, very aggressive. And I dare say it, even if Max would have been on the hards at the start, the way he launched, and because Hamilton moved to cover off Ocon, he did leave the door open on the left, which is where Max swooped through. I'm talking about the second restart, not the first one, where he just bulldozed his way off the track and got a penalty for it, and rightly so. With regards to his driving standards, shall I get the can opener now for the worms I'm about to unleash, or
go for it?
Okay. We all know Max is aggressive, and he puts his car in a position where sometimes he will say, look, you either brake and concede, or we have an accident. We only have to look at Monza to see that. But when he was going down the straight today, and I am talking about that incident where Lewis hits the back of him, he was slowing to let Lewis pass. Now, yes, he lifted off, which does initiate some form of engine braking, as it does in a road car. But obviously with these Formula One cars, they have very complex hybrid systems. So when he lifts off, it's going to start regenning. I don't know if his rain light started flashing or not. I honestly can't remember. But the point is, Hamilton would have been able to see that Max was lifting off. And Hamilton said himself, he downshifted. As in Hamilton said, he, as in Lewis, downshifted. When he realised Max was slowing down, Max was trying to let him pass, but he was trying to make sure Lewis was passed before they went through the DRS detection, which you're going to want to do, because you're going to want to get as good a run as you can back on the driver who you're battling for the world title with.
Yeah, no, I agree. Sorry, are you still going?
I'm still pondering.
Yeah. Okay.
I will wrap this up in a moment, I promise.
No, that's fine. You go ahead.
But Max didn't cause Lewis to crash into him on that straight. I'm putting it out there, and I know that we're going to have different opinions, and that's part of life and part of F1. I don't think Max intentionally caused an accident or all the rest of it. Lewis should have perhaps interpreted the situation a bit better. I would also like to point out both drivers, emotions running very high. I've never experienced a race like this, right? I've never had like the sort of emotion that I've had whilst I've been watching a race. And when I say emotion, I don't mean sad. I mean, what on earth is going on? And it was bad enough for me as a spectator. So to be a title rival sitting in the cockpit under the lights with millions of people watching you on TV, I can't imagine the pressure they were under. You muted, Tom.
Yeah, no apologies. I was having a window issue. It just shut down my Zoom for a second. Bear with me again. Sorry about that, gents. Yes, no. I think we'll probably get into that a little bit more in the post show. So stick around for the post show, our YouTube audience, and get into that. And I'm sure we'll discuss it when it comes to drive for the day as well. I'm going to move on to you now, Aaron. A touch unlucky today from Bottas, but a great recovery and a last gasp podium. Reminds me a bit of when he passed Stroll at Baku on the last lap, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was very much Baku 2017 vibes. And there was a bit of that all the way through the race because the amount of red flags and restarts and just general carnage, it was very, very similar to that race. He kind of got the raw end of the deal, didn't he, in terms of all the bad luck that Mercedes were having. He got shuffled. He made a good start and he secured that second place, which was crucial in the opening stages. But there was always going to be a red flag or a safety car in this race that caught somebody out. And if it was going to catch anybody out of Mercedes, it was going to be Bottas. And then he kind of did his Bottas thing where he got stuck. And then towards the second half of the third or fourth part of the race, after the final restart, he finally got past Ricciardo. Took him a few attempts, but overtaking wasn't easy, and some other drivers showed that it was definitely possible. Obviously, the closer you come in terms of car performance, the trickier it becomes. So for Bottas to actually make two bona fide overtakes to secure a podium is pretty good going for Valtteri as things go, because he generally tends to get a wee bit stuck and a bit bogged down. So it was pretty good for him. He did get a raw end of the deal in terms of the bad luck, but he'll be very happy with that. Across the line, you saw his reaction, punch in the air, and the Mercedes mechanics and team staff were really happy for him. And I think they're giving him like a really big send off, which is nice to see for Valtteri before he goes to Alpha.
Yeah, I think Mercedes genuinely really do like Valtteri Bottas and just willing him to succeed, but just in the end, just not really matching his far more superior teammate. But nice to see him still fighting for results and fighting for the team and not doing what a lot of people suspected, which was sabotage Lewis's title bid. And then we move on to Esteban Ocon now, the luckiest man in motorsport seemingly, with the Red Sea parting again for him. This time actually at the Red Sea. He will be slightly gutted that he lost a podium at the end there though, Phil, won't he?
Yeah, I mean, he ran to go from 9th to be in the mix. And while the two title combatants are doing whatever they're doing with each other, not being able to pass each other cleanly or whatever, but the Esteban Ocon just sat there and did his thing. And similar, they made the mention of Hungarian Grand Prix and all. He stayed up there and he held on. I mean, you look at Fernando Alonso. We'll talk about him later. After the performance Fernando Alonso put on at the last race, to be so far away while Esteban Ocon basically took that role this week is something. But I also think it's showing the maturity of Esteban Ocon. We've questioned his stand. Probably all of us at some point have questioned his driving and questioned some of the decisions he's made and whatever. But his run at Hungary was a great race for him to get his first Grand Prix win. And I think this race today was a great performance again. I mean, Alpine last week basically went and took the life and everything out of AlphaTauri. But this last couple of weeks has also shown that both of their drivers are ready for these new regulations to come along in 2022, because it seems like they're both switched on and looking forward to the opportunity to possibly be up there on a more regular basis with the likes of Ferrari, McLaren, and other teams. So unfortunate, the DRS and everything for Bottas got Esteban Ocon at the end, but he did a really, really good job today. And while other things we're going to focus on, obviously other things, Esteban Ocon's performance deserves a lot of credit for the way he handled himself the whole day.
Yeah, once again, couldn't agree more. It was a solid performance from Esteban Ocon. And me not being his biggest fan either. That's definitely a good result there for the team there. So moving on to my favourite team, McLaren. Ricciardo looking quite racy early in the race, even passing Mercedes at one point. So pretty good race all round, Tom, don't you think?
Yeah, I think when people were saying, "Oh, Danny Rick's on for a podium," I think they're a bit optimistic given how relatively lacklustre he's been when he's been in those positions this year.
I was one of those people.
No, I know, but I was when I saw him up in P4 and I saw someone say, "Oh, he could get a podium." I thought he could. Is he really going to? And sadly, he didn't. But it was still a good race. P5, very good result for Danny Rick. I'm not sure how much closer that brings McLaren because Ferrari were, I think, 7th and 8th, and then Lando was 10th or something around that. So, in terms of the constructors, it's not going to do much, but it was a good race for Danny Rick. Didn't see much of him because there was so much else going on in this race. I wonder what, and yes, it's hard to say like what I thought of him this race, other than good job was P5, but I forgot about everybody except for the front two, to be honest, as I'm sure most of us did.
Yeah, I think we can all be a little bit guilty of that. And just for the record there, it's a massive gain for McLaren in the Constructors' Championship. They're now a point closer to Ferrari than they were at the start of the day. So, it's big gains. They're definitely back on for that third place. Moving on to somebody who I thought, in Pierre Gasly, was one of the few drivers that didn't seem to be involved in any antics at all today. Another clean race for him, Aaron?
Yeah, Pierre Gasly was actually in this race. But the also ran like a few others. There's so much going on elsewhere. But, he kept out of trouble. And this is one of those tracks, a little bit like Baku, where you have to keep your nose clean and you have to be in it to win it. And if the front guys start tripping over each other, you might have an Ocon winning the race or a Gasly coming through to win it. And that didn't happen today. But, again, for Pierre, very consistent, bagging the points, 6th place for AlphaTauri. If you offered them 6th place at every race, they would absolutely snap your hand off for it. So to have a driver delivering at more or less that level, more or less every race, is massive for them, because Tsunoda doesn't always set the world on fire, and if they put another young Red Bull driver in there, who's to say what's going to happen? Are they going to fall back down the order? Gasly is carrying that team, and he's shown it again today. I remember battling with Ricciardo before the first red flag, but after then I don't think we saw him at all. But sometimes that just shows how well someone is delivering, that their good results are unnoticed because they're doing it all the time.
Yeah, no, he's another solid performance from Gasly, definitely. And so moving on to Charles Leclerc, 4th to 7th doesn't seem like a great result on paper, but in the end he was lucky to get away without damage. So what was your opinion of his race then, Phil?
Yeah, the incident with Sergio Perez probably was the key, was a key turning point in his day, Tom, and it was, he also had a battle with his smooth operating teammate and went off the track in that instance too. Wasn't the best day for Charles. He had a great day yesterday in qualifying, but it wasn't the best today to go and consolidate points when they probably didn't have the outright pace and also got into multiple incidents during the day. That's really, you just take it and leave it. You talk about what Gasly's performance was. It was generally nondescript, and that's really where we're going to get to once we get past Esteban Ocon, unfortunately, with most of this race. At least for Ferrari. I know for you as a McLaren fan, Tom, it didn't help this day, but really the last few months haven't helped for McLaren since Danny Rick's win, or Daniel Ricciardo. I should have said cut it off at Danny Rick's race for this race, but ever since his win at Italy, it's gone Ferrari's way. And even in this instance, when they were almost running over each other, they still got away with it. Both scored points, and getting ready to finish out this year, take third in constructors, and kind of reset into 22 as possibly the most like level, even driver lineup there is on the grid. And there will be continuity there as well. I mean, general continuity across most of the teams, but it'll be good for Ferrari next year. I think this is like talking about what Alpine's been able to do. I think what Ferrari's performance here in the last few months has shown is that maybe they've finally turned the corner. Maybe they're coming back to being the Ferrari of old. And the battles between them and McLaren are going to really matter again up front with the big two that has existed for the last few years. And it could be like 2010 and 2012 again, which would be good for the sport in general.
Yeah, they were never going to be kept down for long, were they, Ferrari? And another double points finish for them with Carlos Sainz in 8th place, Tom. And Carlos Sainz now the driver with the most points without a win. Some good early overtakes, but quite a quiet day for him in comparison. What's your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I was impressed with what we did see of Sainz today because he worked his way up through the field pretty quickly. He started P15, I think it was P15, P14. I think he was P15. But it was a good result. He did have a good battle with Leclerc at one point when Leclerc went a bit wide into turn one to hold a lasting advantage. Hint, hint, stewards. But he put in some good moves. You know, he was battling well on track. He did probably about as well as was to be expected of the Ferrari this weekend. You know, much like Gasly and everybody else we've just spoken about, bar the front two, he sort of just went about his business and just cracked on with it. He did, I don't really know what else to add. You know, it was just a solid result for him. Good for Ferrari and just strengthening their grip on third in the constructors.
Yeah, another strong results for what he's commonly become known as Sunday Sainz. It's unfortunate for a McLaren fan to see Ferrari doing so well, but yeah, absolutely, it's another strong performance from him, and a strong performance as well from Antonio Giovinazzi back there in 9th place, 2 points. You'd be forgiven for forgetting about Alfa Romeo in a race like this, Aaron, but actually he was actually noticed on track a few times today.
He was. And I'll give Giovinazzi his credit. He did a lot better than I expected him to. So I was flicking through a few drivers just to watch the start on board with, just sort of hoping to be on board with the one person who caused chaos. And he was one of my candidates. I eventually landed on Lance Stroll, actually, just for reference. But it's one of those, again, like he kept his nose clean. And we saw it at Monza where he qualified really well. And then on the first lap, ended up being spun around by, I think it was Sainz's Ferrari, because he misjudged his re-entry at the second chicane. So to navigate his way through all the carnage, because he could quite easily been one of those, as so many others could have, been collected by the Perez and Leclerc collision. It's quite incredible that so many of the midfield cars got through, and it was the guys at the back, like the Mazapins and Russells, who got caught out by it. But it must have just been that bottleneck. He managed to get his way through, and in comparison to his teammate, he did a solid job. Kept his nose clean, fought his battles, and just, I guess he thought big picture, because we didn't see a great deal of him after, say, about halfway, and there may have been a few other things happening.
Yeah, well, he's Formula E bound now, so I'm sure he'll get a lot more TV time in Formula E, because the exciting drivers, and he does tend to be fairly exciting when he's in close racing, do get a lot of coverage in Formula E, so I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of Italian Jesus next year. Moving on to Lando Norris and the last of the points finishes then, Phil. It all started so well for him, but bad luck with the red flag, and come across a stationary Perez didn't help his race either.
Yeah, it was I mean, I think the start of the race was good for him, Tom, and it seemed like he was going to be able to get a top 5, top 6 finish if there was any normalcy. I mean, how could you have that at this race? But and it definitely didn't come through. The red flag did not help him. getting stuck behind traffic, the Perez incident, and all the argy-bargy that went on around that sent him to the tail. And when you get to the back there, even with all the stuff that happened after that, you're not going to really be able to make up the kind of time that you need to make up. And it, as the guys have said, with some of the other drivers so far, you're basically holding on. And after all the crashing and all the safety cars and restarts and all, to make it to the end of the race was just a bonus. And to get points is a bonus. So for Lando, it's not what he wanted coming into this weekend, I'm sure. I think he had obviously had the better of Daniel, which has been the case for virtually most of this year. But the result will show that he wasn't ahead of him in the race. But I think we know that Lando, for most of this year, has really shown and that he's taken that step forward. Today may not have been one of his better races. It really wasn't out of because of him, but I'm curious to see how he'll finish the year, what kind of momentum he'll take into next year, because he's one of those guys that is that next wave. All the super best friends with him and George Russell and Charles Leclerc and all of them, they're all going to kind of be in a good situation. So how will that all work out for all the super best friends going into 2022, and how they all race on the real track instead of just strictly in the sim world, where they have so many great battles.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Lando's definitely one of those, as you say, super best friends. I like that. I like that analogy very much. So, moving on to a lot of people's driver of the day from last week. Not mine, but a lot of people have said driver of the day, Lance Stroll. So, moving on to you, Tom. If he had made a couple of places at the start there, but that's kind of about as good as it got for Stroll.
Yeah, I've got to be honest. I was borderline placing bets at one point as to who was going to crash out next. This was after the second red flag. And I'd said Stroll will crash out next. I was pretty sure it was going to be him, but alas, we didn't have any further DNS. Thankfully, after that, I didn't see anything of Stroll this weekend. I don't even know what he did. Where did he finish? P11.
Yes, P11, just outside the points.
P11. Okay, yeah. I guess to show you how much I paid attention to Stroll this weekend, or today. But the thing is, she had an awful qualifying. Aston had an awful qualifying. P11, given Perez went out, so he'd have been P12, and then he might have been P13, P14 realistically. I don't know how much further he'd have got up the field. Not great, is it? I mean, he did better than his teammate, but his teammate had to retire because of an incident with another driver.
He didn't retire. He was still classified. Otherwise, my song doesn't make sense at the start. He was still classified.
Okay. I thought it was fair enough.
Yeah, he did retire technically, but he's still classified.
Because he did over 80% of race distance or something. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Well, yeah, but Stroll just he's just like a tree. It's like he just exists, but you just don't really care.
Wow.
He's just like a bit of a plank, isn't he?
Fantastic. I've never heard Lance Stroll described as a tree, but he's certainly not gonna leave anytime soon. I'm really sorry. That was a terrible pun. We'll move on swiftly after that then. So Nicholas Latifi, 12th place. Not really a fitting tribute to the late Sir Frank, but given the pace that car had today, not really a bad run, Aaron.
Yeah, it was another case of avoiding the mayhem. I've just very quickly scrolled through the Williams Twitter feed to sort of get an idea of how Latifi's race went. So he started in 16th and was 19th at the end of the first lap. So he didn't actually have that great a start, which may have played a hand in him sort of staying out of trouble because he might have just sort of been out of the firing line. And it looked like he could have been on for points, but then all all the craziness stopped being in the midfield and started being higher up the order. But like you say, an emotional weekend for Williams. And I think just for their cars to be out on track, for the Williams name to still be there after all the trouble that they've had financially and handing the team over, coming away from the Williams family, and now obviously Sir Frank passing away, God rest his soul. A tough weekend for Williams, and one I think that they'll just maybe just be pleased to see the back of, with sort of everything fairly normal for them, and a solid 12th place finish considering. If it had been George finishing in 12th, I think we'd have been very impressed. So I think we have to treat Latifi with the same amount of respect and say well done, because he's finished ahead of some quick guys, in quick cars. So Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri was sometimes popping it up at the top of the order when he did some of his practice runs and his qualifying runs. So there was pace in that car, maybe just a few less brains. So Latifi perhaps thinking his way through the race a little bit more smartly than others, which played to his strengths and paid dividends.
Yeah, not a bad performance at all there. And so moving on to Fernando Alonso, seemed to be going backwards at the start, struggling with deployment, Phil, but not really a great result for the Alpine number 2 driver.
No, Alpine number 2 driver. That's funny. That's a good one. The 2-time world champion who was probably the driver of the day last week, and now he's the number 2 driver. That's good. Yeah, he did not have a great weekend. He definitely looked like a number 2 driver, not only in qualifying, but in the race. Had issues, mechanicals, all kinds of stuff for Fred. It looked like his Indy 500 run a few years ago, but, whichever one you want to pick, he's had at Indy 500. But, I think after Qatar and what he did there, the way the season's been, he's had the ebbs and flows have definitely been there for Fred, and you usually have a good one and you have a bad one. Well, it probably means he'll have a good one next week. Unfortunate, but they made their points. They did what they had to do last week. I think their season was made last week with his performance, and that's what's going to stand out no matter what. He could fall out of the race at Abu Dhabi first. It really won't matter. His job in defending Lewis Hamilton at Hungary and then finishing 3rd at Qatar, along, of course, with Ocon's win. Those are the 3 highlights of the year, and that for a guy who had been driving WEC and doing all kinds of other stuff, it's pretty good coming back from out of semi-retirement to back in Formula One. This may have not been one of his best days, but hey, Fred has them once in a while. It's okay. It's not like he'll be behind Vitaly Petrov or something in a big spot like he was a few years ago.
Yeah, I was just trying to get a rise out of you with that Alonso comment, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, as you say, they've done their job. 29-point lead over AlphaTauri now, so it's just a case of seeing the season out for them now. That job's basically done. It's all but sealed, the position, which probably they would have been looking to be a little bit higher at the start of the season. But you reap what you sow, and their car design is 3-year-old car now effectively. So pretty strong. In the end, but moving on to the person that's probably partly responsible for why they've finished in that position in the Constructors' Championship is Yuki Tsunoda. Tom, he seemed to be back to his old self. He did have a couple of nice overtakes that we saw early on in the race, but the slightly comical re-entry to the pit to change the front wing. And what did you make of his race?
Yuki. Yeah. You pretty much summed it up. You said he was back to his normal self. It's a shame because he had a really good qualifying. He put that AlphaTauri higher up than it should have been. But it's just the move himself was clumsy, really, really clumsy. And then when he got stuck in his front wing when he was trying to reverse, I think he was beginning to panic or fluster a bit at that point. And then just limped home. Well, limped back to the pits, got a front wing change, got a 5-second time penalty for causing a collision, and then just poodled around to the end. It's not really much more to add to that. To be honest, he was just not really good Saturday, terrible Sunday, and yeah, he was just a bit shit.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame, really. He doesn't seem to be able to put it together over a full weekend, unfortunately, Yuki Tsunoda. But moving on to the last of the official finishes was Kimi Raikkonen. Looked feisty at parts, but it seemed to be joining in the bullying of Sebastian Vettel. Aaron, how do you think he did? Is there life in the old dog yet?
Seb or Kimi?
This was Kimi.
For Kimi, it was a bizarre race for Kimi, because that move with Seb, like the first one down to turn one where he just sort of sent it, was brilliant. Okay, he's gone a bit deep and Seb's got him back, but then to try and hang it around the outside of the fast left-hander, I think that's turn 4 or 5, or I don't know, one of the many corners.
One of the 27.
One of the 27 corners that turns left. On my notes, I've got it down as dumb, which it's just not something I associated with Kimi. It was just a bit silly. He didn't have the line into the corner. Yeah, the next corner was a sort of sweeping right, but you're never going to run side by side through there. So it was hardly surprising to see that they'd made contact. And for me, Kimi was completely the aggressor and at fault for that, because he was trying to do something that just was never going to work, because Seb had the inside line. And for a bloke who's done as many Grand Prix as he has, that was really surprising and a touch disappointing, actually, because it almost has a blasé attitude to, oh well, I'm retiring. I'll just have a go because I can, and it doesn't really have any consequences. And perhaps on that circuit wasn't the smartest idea.
No, absolutely true. It's it's my feelings on Kimi Raikkonen, so I'm just gonna stay quiet, I think, to be honest. So moving on to the first of the classified non-finishers, Sebastian Vettel. Moving on to you, Phil. Not a lot of pace, had a bit of a crash with Tsunoda and Kimi. More of a pinball than a driver today.
Yeah, I mean, Yuki used him up, and then or whatever, maybe he didn't. Who knows? I mean, it's Yuki Tsunoda, and if he isn't hitting something, he's probably just in the way. For Sebastian Vettel, it was a rough weekend. They had no pace in qualifying, and then he had that incident in turn 1 with Yuki. Then him and his badminton buddy got into it in one of those S sections. I don't know what Kimi saw there. Maybe he saw the vodka he was going to have later in the day. I mean, it is very late in Saudi, so I don't know if he's really, but it is Kimi Raikkonen, so maybe he's going to be partying all night long. He figured he wanted to take some wings and stuff off of Seb's car and get him ready for the after party. I don't know. They stopped the car to save the engine, as though it really matters at this point. I mean, who cares? All these teams have taken engine penalties, so what are they really saving? But yeah, they stopped him. I think there was so much damage on that car. He had no pace before they damaged the car. So I can only imagine how that car drove once he had been hit twice. It's kind of unfortunate for Seb, but that's been the deal here for a lot of this season. They've had moments, the Aston Martin, whatever they are, the Stroll F1 team, but more or less they've been right on the edge of being in the back, and they're 7th in the constructors. They're 7th in the constructors for a reason. They aren't really a direct competitor with AlphaTauri. They're definitely not in the mix with the 5 teams ahead of AlphaTauri, but they're well ahead of Williams, Alfa Romeo, and Haas. So run out the string. Let's see if they actually can make a car that isn't a Mercedes next year, and maybe Sebastian Vettel can bring it back old school to like sand like circa 2010 or something and maybe pull something out. I mean, he had a couple, the Hungarian Grand Prix was a good run and a couple other runs here and there, but it's been kind of a nondescript year even. It's been a nondescript few years for the former 4-time world champion.
Yeah, I'm definitely up for a return of the 2010 form of Sebastian Vettel, just not the 2010 Vettel himself, because he's one of the most likeable men in the paddock now, and it'd be great to see him back up there fighting for podiums where he should be. Moving on to somebody who has been fighting for podiums recently, but unfortunately the first of the official non-finishers, Sergio Perez classified 17th, but was out very early on. Red Bull effectively out of the Constructors' Championship now, Tom?
Oh, well, it's definitely an advantage Mercedes, isn't it, after that? You know, they got a 1-3. There's only one. There's only one thing they could have done better, which would have been a 1-2, obviously. I'm just going to look at the difference in constructors at the moment, but it would take a fairly big swing next. I say fairly big.
It's 28 points.
Yeah, so the second driver will come into play even more next week. But Perez, did you see his launch at the original race start? So the first one at 5:30, he so nearly steamrolled into Max because Max didn't have the best launches and Perez had a bit of a lightning launch. At one point, I thought Perez was I thought he was gonna hit Max, and I was just thinking, oh my God, just imagine really. But thankfully he didn't, and yes, I realised how well shot sounded. But then his DNF. Leclerc said, "Did Perez not see him?" But Leclerc was a bit optimistic, putting his car in that position on a street circuit that we've never been to. We've already seen carnage at in the Formula 2 race and the first start of the F1 race this weekend. I don't think Perez was entirely to blame. I think he needs to share some of the blame for that. I can't remember what the outcome was for it. I don't even know if there was anything for it in the end. I think it was just put down as a collision. But Perez, my God, did you see how close Latifi was? I don't know how many people picked it up, but Latifi so nearly T-boned Perez as Perez bounced off the wall. And if he would have done, we could have been looking at a very, very, very different outcome. And that is something which I want to talk about in a bit, which is a wider topic about this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I did catch that, and it was a pretty scary moment. Not quite as bad as obviously Hubert and Radion a few years ago, but still wouldn't have been a healthy result. And
it had that level of trepidation about it.
It certainly would have been a scary incident. But speaking of scary incidents, I'll move on to everyone's favourite Russian, and that's Nikita Mazepin. Aaron runs high 16th at one point, but then he forgot where the brake pedal was and ended George Russell's race.
Yeah, he did. I think he was pretty blameless for that, to be honest, because there was so much happening, and you can't expect your driver of his lack of skill to be able to respond quickly enough. So it was no surprise that he drove it to the back of George. But in all seriousness, there was not much any driver could have done in that situation. There was so much happening so fast. I think George was sort of out of kilter as well because he'd gone across the little runoff bit at turn 2. So Mazepin had come round, and then George was maybe still trying to get up to speed and then had to hit the brakes. There must have been quite a large speed difference. And obviously the impact was fairly severe. Obviously, we don't want to see drivers hurt, no matter who they are, what we think of them. So to see Mazepin walk away from that with no major damage to himself is a win for safety in F1. But his race didn't really last very long. And he's driving a Haas, so you can't really speak too much about him because he didn't have time to do anything that, the sort of stuff he normally does, like getting in the way and annoying everyone. So he was out before he could even bother doing that.
bit of a shame for everyone involved, really. But yeah, no, it's just glad to see he was okay, to be honest, because it was a pretty hefty whack, and we saw in the F2 as well earlier. Tio Porcher and one of the Fittipaldi offspawn, I can't remember which which one it was, but
Enzo, I think.
Enzo Fittipaldi, yes, that's the one. I haven't heard an update on his condition yet. I know he was airlifted away, and it's good to see that Mazepin was okay in that incident. Moving on to you, Phil, then with George Russell. He's a good battle with Stroll in the early phases, but that's kind of all we saw of him, really.
Yeah, it was not. George had his run a few months ago, which basically gave Williams their spot in 8th in the Constructors' Championship. But ever since then, once the announcement came through that he's going to be Lewis's teammate next year, Doralton, whoever's made the calls, the car has basically become very nondescript. And it's sad with the passing of Frank Williams for how great of a man he was and what he did for this sport and what he gave and all the things he did. And this is one of the last drivers he ever had. And, this race was whatever. It was his qualifying. He got into Q2, but his start wasn't good. And then he was battling with Stroll. So you never know what's going to happen with that. You're likely going to get into contact with him, but it was a bit of a mess there. And then that accident after that first safety, the first red flag was kind of it was just liable to happen. Glad that Egghead walked away there, but you kind of expect that out of him, that he would just drive into a car that's stationary. But it's a place that you kind of goes to the greater issue of the track itself, where you have nowhere to go, or where there are places to go, it's probably a little bit too much. So, we probably are going to get into that later anyway. But just glad George is okay. It's one race to go in this season for his for one race in his Williams career as he moves on to greener pastures at Mercedes, and his buddy, part of the whole Super Best Friends crew, and Alex Albon will now take his place there alongside Canadian billionaire son, who has a ride in Latifi in 2022.
Yeah, but he can't wait to get onto, as you say, greener pastures or silver pastures, as it may well be next year. The last driver we're going to talk about today, Mick Schumacher, first victim of the Saudi Arabian walls on lap 10. And I was watching the race with my parents, and my father at that point said to me just before it, well, this race is a bit dull, isn't it? And then, sprung into life. And I've never seen him so gripped on a race since then. So on to you, Tom, then. Give us a 10-lap summary of Mick Schumacher's race.
I'll give you a 10-word summary. It's lights down, away we go. Shit, I'm in the wall. No, that's pretty much it. It's funny you should say that you said to your dad, or that your dad said, oh, it's a bit of a boy. I thought the same thing. I thought, oh, we're settling into a bit of a procession. And then Mick Schumacher just went, oh, I'm bored now, and just went Hadouken and went into the wall, basically. It was pretty similar to who crashed in FP2? Leclerc. It was the way the back of the car just basically says, I don't want any more grip now, and then just basically completely did an Uno reverse card on him and went straight into the wall. It was a nasty shunt as well. Maybe Schumacher. Actually, do you know what? I've just worked it out. Schumacher was sitting there going, "Nah, my dad's the GOAT, not Hamilton," and he was determined to bring out the red flag because he just went to red flag. He went, "Nah, tell you what, hun, I'll do this. You don't pit. We've got it sorted." That was what it was.
Hell of a conspiracy theory, that one. That's a new one.
Well, there wasn't enough spice in this race, so I thought I'd add a bit more.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we've got quite enough to talk about, to be honest, for the rest of this podcast now. So, we'll give you an opportunity to talk about the pinch points from what we've seen in this race and the big ticket incidents as well, whilst talking about drive of the day, because I'm sure they'll feature in that. So feel free to do a bit of a summary on your thoughts on the big incidents as well. So we'll start with you, Aaron. Who is your driver of the day, and what's your take on the big incidents that you haven't been able to talk about so far?
So my driver of the day is Esteban Ocon, because I think to have kept that Alpine where it was, and to manage his way through the chaos. I think he drew on all the experience from Hungary, having Seb Vettel breathing down his neck for 50, 60 odd laps to sort of manage himself. He was really unlucky that the Bottas just absolutely mugged him on the final straight, but he drove really, really well. He could easily have got tangled up with Hamilton and Verstappen at the restart, or just decided he didn't want any part of it. But he put himself in there and he was brave, and he almost got the big reward. But P4 from, I can't remember where he started. Was he in the top 10? I can't remember, or just that might have been 9th.
I can't recall. I think he was in Q3. I don't have that in front of me.
Yeah, so from 9th in the Alpine to 4th, that's pretty good going. And well, the big incident, it's a really messy situation, and the emotional side of me is Max Verstappen was banged to rights. He stopped on the track, stopping on the track when he didn't need to. It was dangerous. But I actually agree with what Tom said, that Verstappen didn't cause the accident, at least not directly, but it was he who started the whole chain reaction with his very robust defense into turn 1. And then from there, it was just carnage, because the FIA didn't have control of the situation. They weren't able to relay to both teams what needed to be done. And by that point, they'd already crashed into each other, because one of them had a picture of what was happening and one didn't. And the blame is not equally shared in all parts, but Max has a case to answer for. Lewis has a case to answer for not just driving past immediately. But then so do the FIA and the teams, and just the way it was handled was incredibly messy. It creates an awful lot of stories and talking points and column inches, which is going to sell a lot of newspapers or whatever. But for F1 as a sporting image, it's not great. But it gives us a lot to talk about. It's very exciting.
Yeah. Sorry, Tom. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on what Aaron said. First of all, the shock on my face when he said, "I actually agree with Tom." I was like, "Really?"
Your face was a picture. You were shaking your head in disbelief, and then when he said, "I agree with Tom," you were like, "What?" Double take.
But yeah, Aaron, I'm glad you mentioned about the FIA. Here we go. Buckle in, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody else.
You may as well do your drive of the day while you're there, Tom.
Ocon. Simple. The FIA were a bloody shambles today. Specifically, Michael Masi. I have tried to defend him in the past, and F1 cynics they seem to love like the sort of romanticism of a driver or an individual from yesteryear. It's like they'll always long for Charlie Whiting, or they'll always long for a driver who's not around anymore. And it does seem to be stronger in F1 than other sports I follow, because I'm a very big rugby fan, being Welsh, and I'm also quite a big weightlifting fan, because it's what I do in my spare time, of which there doesn't seem to be much anymore. But F1, by a country mile, always has people saying, "Oh, you're back in the glory days," or "back in this, back in that." And I've always tried to defend Masi by saying, look, he's new into this role. Charlie Whiting leaves behind him a big legacy, and Masi was thrust into this position with not sort of like unexpectedly almost, because we didn't expect Charlie Whiting to pass when he did. And I've always tried to sort of be neutral and maintain the Massey is learning on the job, and there are so many complicated rules, regulations, and intricacies of Formula One that he still has to get his head around. But he does not help himself, and I'm banging my fist on the desk now as well because I'm really getting into it. Massey does not help himself when he just starts sassing people on the radio, and to then not tell Mercedes that Massey himself has told Red Bull they have to let him past. That just caused a complete cluster F of just mixed messages, nobody knowing what was going on. So just rewinding back to the incident, Verstappen is thinking, right, I've got to let Hamilton pass. I want to let him pass before DRS, so I hit the activation point and I catch DRS. Why wouldn't he? That's a brilliant racing brain. Hamilton comes up behind Verstappen. Mercedes haven't told him how Verstappen's got to let you pass because Massey hasn't told Mercedes. So Mercedes can't tell Hamilton. Hamilton then is thinking, oh, I don't know what's going on. Rightly thinks there could be something up ahead. There could be debris, there could be anything. We'd had 3 or 4 VSCs and 2 red flags by this point. So there was precedent in this race already that there was going to be something on the track or there was going to be something wrong. And then, obviously, we saw the incident. And hearing Ron Meadows that angry on the phone, he tore Michael Massey a new one. And I cannot defend Michael Massey in this. We are lucky today that there was not a more serious accident. We are lucky that Nikita Mazepin has pretty much walked away from that accident because he went square on into the back of that Williams and could have easily broken both of his legs. You only have to look at the likes of Billy Monger to see how serious an accident that could have been. And for the FIA to homologate this circuit, I cannot fathom how they think this is okay. Where on earth in the sequence, when designing this track, did they think, oh, I know, let's squeeze everybody together in cars that are 2 meters wide in a circuit that's only marginally wider than Monaco, give a bunch of drivers, including 2 who hate each other's guts, who are going for the World Championship with 2 races to go, including this one. Who the hell thought that was a good idea? And to only pass one decision to the stewards, like Phil said, it was the one decision for Verstappen for leaving the track and gaining an advantage. It's just been an absolute bloody farce this weekend. And today it's just they've F1 looks like a laughing stock at the moment because there have been decisions thrown out left, right, and centre. There have been temper tantrums from Red Bull, from Mercedes, from the FIA, from me right now, and it's just a joke, and something has to change. Whether it's we have the same stewards week in, week out, whether there's a restructuring of the FIA, whether there's a restructuring of how they go about sort of troubleshooting these events, or how the sort of process is changed for on a weekend. Because if Michael Massey is sitting there thinking, oh, well, this has happened, that's happened, but he hasn't told Mercedes that Red Bull are going to let Hamilton past, that could have been an airplane accident. That could have been huge. You know, it's just not on.
Yeah, no, I echo that a lot. To be honest, at times I was fully expecting Noel Edmonds to come on and offer the deal or no deal to Red Bull. It just seemed absolutely farcical. They're just making rules up as they go along, and where in the rule book does it say that you know
you can offer positions? Yeah,
and the whole thing just stinks to me a little bit. And I just want to read out 2 quotes as well. I've just seen on Twitter. One from Christian Horner, which is why Karen Horner is trending once again. Sector 1 is more driver focused, and Sector 2 and 3 is more about the engine. Anyone can drive in a straight line. Those kind of comments just not helpful and completely pointless. And then Lewis Hamilton, difficult to fight a driver that doesn't work to the same rule book. Again, when you've got drivers feeling they have to say that kind of thing because they've just lost faith in the ownership of the rule books, it doesn't bode well at all. So I completely agree with your rant there, Tom, even if I disagree with your driver choice. But there we go. Moving on to Phil, then, if you want to give us your driver today, and the floor is yours for any further rants if you wish to. Strap in tight, boys.
Tom did a great job, and I'll credit Tom. I was hot in the chat, and I know his driver. I'm not a fan of his driver, and I'm sure he's not a fan of my driver, and I probably went over the line, and I'm dealing with some stuff, but that's separate to what all went on today. Today's race was, I mean, Ocon's the guy. It's going to be a sweep because I can't give it to my guy or his guy or anything. This is a joke. This race, the Rights Out and Away We Grow Grand Prix it came through in flying colors. It was a cluster. There was tons of accidents. They could have had massive. You had Mick Schumacher and Charles Leclerc going off at 250 Ks and had massive crashes. You had the egghead running into the back of George. You had all these F2 crashes that went on. It was a totally farcical weekend, and it was it's a black eye for a sport that's supposed to be like the pinnacle of motorsport. They hold themselves as the pinnacle of motorsport, Formula One. And you have this battle, albeit with two people that probably be better off if they'd go and have a boxing fight instead of racing. But that Karen Horner would probably run in with a chair or something and nail Lewis in the head, because it seems like his MO anyway. I could get on a separate rant about him and how he does business and how he and all that leadership is, but I'll save that for the GSP. This race was just terrible. It was not a good look on any stretch of the imagination for Formula One. It wasn't a good look that the two guys that are battling for the world championship don't really know how to drive around each other. It's a sad commentary on where we've come to as a sport, where it's almost driven by social media goons and trying to have quotes on social media. It's dangerous, really. And I said this prior to us starting recording, that I have this very bad feeling about what's coming next week. I don't feel like this is going to end up in a clean, straightforward fight at Abu Dhabi. I don't think that these guys are going to make it out of turn 3 or 4, whatever the hell corner they have they've reprofiled this track. And in today's day and age, if that happens, I can only imagine what's going to come from that. And how do you deal with that for all these months going into next year? As one thing, Michael Massey's performance today was akin to what they do in NASCAR and WWE. It was a joke, and he put a lot of guys in danger. It didn't seem like he had any control. The guys who were the driver stewards or the stewards for the weekend didn't seem like they had any involvement in the race. They did the 5-second penalty to almost save face because they had lost complete control of this. It became a circus. Considering they were at a circus, the track was a dump. It's unsafe. They talk about tracks that say that they're grade 1 racetracks. There's nothing grade 1 about that racetrack. It's the same way Monaco isn't a grade 1 racetrack, but because it's historic, we go there. There's history is one race. And it should be the last race. It won't be, but it should be the last race we have there, because this is one of the worst races in Formula One history on so many levels. And it's something that Formula One has to deal with PR-wise. And I don't think Liberty has the ability to do that. And no matter what happens next week, whatever comes, this race is going to be the precipice of what everything is built off of for next year, because they've lost it. It's like you've let the inmates run the asylum. It's just gone off the rails.
Yeah, maybe not grade 1, maybe more first grade for track design. Certainly not an elite track by any stretch of the imagination. It looked exciting, it looked fun to drive, but in a race situation, just for me, just seems a little too crazy. But that kind of wraps us up for the podcast. Stick around for the post show as well. But I'll just take this opportunity to allow you guys to plug anything that you want to plug. We'll start with you, Tom. What would you like to plug?
a new FIA race director. But in all seriousness, no, I'm part of Everything F1. You can find us at everythingf1.com. Across all our socials, we are at Join EF1. We have our podcast, which is the Everything F1 podcast, where we'll be recording on Tuesday to share some thoughts on the race we've just had and also preview the winner takes all duel next week. Also, we have a YouTube channel, which is Everything F1, where we're doing circuit guides, all that kind of thing. We're trying to grow that quite a lot. And also we have a Discord server, which is steadily growing.
Oh, sorry, more issues there. I was just checking the checking the live stream for comments for afterwards. Cool. Aaron, have you got anything you want to plug, podcast or website wise?
Oh yes, I run the 5 Red Lights, and you can find that on YouTube and occasionally on podcast platforms. Coming up there a little bit more recent. So just go on YouTube and search 5 Red Lights. Find most of my videos there. And so I do race previews and reviews, and I did some rudimentary analysis of the Turn 4 Brazil incident. I might have to get my Microsoft Paint tools out again to debate some of the things that happened today. You can also find me on Twitter and on Instagram. On Instagram, it's 5 Red Lights, and on Twitter, I am at 5_red_light.
Fantastic. And Phil, tell us about the GSP and where we can find it.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. The Grip Strip podcast is on most or all major podcast platforms. I'm, as executive producer, failing. The talent version of Phil shows up, but the executive producer is more like Baba Booey. If you can get that reference in England, then God bless you. But we're 80 plus episodes in. This next episode is probably going to be one of the better ones because I haven't been this angry in a while. So back in my old days on my old shows that I used to be on, I would go off on rants. Let's just say I'm going to be going off on a rant or 2 or 5 this coming week to review this race and what will be the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. We're at Grip Strip Pod on Twitter. You can find us, as I said, most platforms. We have YouTube on my YouTube page. I'm at Philip G. Mathew. You can follow my co-host Josh Huffine at JP Huffine as well. We have some takes and responses already so far from what took place, and there will definitely be more to come. So thanks again, Tom, for hosting, and for Tom and Aaron and everybody here, and George and the whole group here on the F1 Chronicle and Grid Talk podcast. It's a great group to be a part of. I'm glad to be a part of it.
And great. Just want to say thank you to all the panelists as well for today. It's a great, fun podcast to come on to. The first time hosting as well for me. And after the aborted attempt, which was my previous attempt at hosting, was the Spa Grand Prix, which never happened. So if you want to hear more from me, I'm on the Monkey Seat podcast. I've kept my opinions fairly well to myself today, so you have to tune into Monkey Seat to hear those. We're at Monkey Seat Pod on the socials and monkeyseatpod.com. If you want to hear more from Formula One Grid Talk, we have a huge back catalogue of shows, as well as reviews, previews and analysis. We have special episodes which have interviews and historic season features to get stuck into. Most recently, an interview that myself and George did with Maurice Hamilton about the life of Murray Walker in his latest book. If you enjoyed this episode of Grid Talk, please consider supporting us via Patreon from just $1 a week, and that is for better microphones, cables and lighting equipment, and maybe a cheeky pint after recording if we're up for it. We're also available on all major podcasting platforms such as Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Verbal, Omni Studio and Pocket Casts, as well as being available on the F1 Chronicle website. All our shows go out live on YouTube straight after the event, and we have a post show where we answer your questions in a live chat. Just search for F1 Chronicle on YouTube, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you know when we're live. We are going to be back tomorrow to preview the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, which is next weekend, and we also have a special Kimi Raikkonen tribute episode on Tuesday to look out for. Don't forget to subscribe on your podcast player of choice, and thank you for listening. Goodbye. There we go. Cheers, guys. And
Well done,
so
Tom.
we'll just move on to the post show then. And
Before you dive in, Tom,
yeah,
I was trying to jump in before while Tom was talking and while Phil was talking. But do you think that Formula One is a bit snobbish?
Yes.
If you look at like their cousin, Formula E, who's the race director there? Is it Scott? Someone?
Oh, I did know.
Sure.
I did know who it was, but I can't remember who it was. I might just Google it. But yeah, he's an American guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
So when
sorry, I don't want to. I'm going to stay on my headset. I got to go make a drink because I'm like mouth is dried and a badger's arsehole at the minute. So I can still hear you.
Okay, good. So when there's like a full course caution or a safety car, you hear his voice come over like the radio, and he says like attention to all teams. Surely that's a quick fix that Formula One could put in, and Michael Massey could have that full control, and you can get the message out to all teams instantly because the technology's there to do it.
Shouldn't you be able to get it on the steering wheels to the drivers, along with getting it to all the team people on the pit boxes? I mean, it's Formula One. It's not NASCAR. I mean, NASCAR's archaic in most everything they do. Even V8 supercars. I mean, minus that weird animal that rolled out on the track yesterday during the Bathurst 1000. I mean, they have their stuff and everything on their steering wheel. You have to have better control. I'm sorry I interrupted, Aaron, but that's...
No, you're right.
Yeah, the race director Scott Elkin, sorry, for Formula E. But yeah, sorry, carry on, Aaron.
I thought it was Scott Elkin, but I was like, surely I thought that was the Ferrari guy as well, John Elkin.
Yeah, he's Formula E, and I think they said he's going to be doing something else, or might be mixing up with someone else. He used to be here in the States working in what was the American Le Mans series and a couple other things. And then once the merge happened, I think he moved over to this side, FIA and whatever, to go and work with them. And he knows his stuff. Maybe he might be the guy.
I just realised I was talking when I went out to the kitchen.
Sorry, I muted you. I muted you. It's fine.
Bastard.
That's the power you get as the host. So just popping into the to the live stream, looking at the comments we've had, and we haven't even talked about the potential that this result could actually change, because we've got the stewards review. Hamilton and Verstappen both summoned to the stewards to give their side of the collision. So we've got some comments from Infinite TK in there, shouting out Tom for your rant yesterday. It was great comedy, and getting reviews.
What time I rant about yesterday?
I'm assuming it was you, because I wasn't on a podcast yesterday. So
I remember having a rant. I rant a lot. So
yeah. Jared Bradley said he'll take my point for calling that it would be mayhem. Disappointed my prediction Schumacher would make the points didn't happen. I don't think that was ever really going to be on the cards, even with... I thought it would be more of a Baku 2016 race where they were all just very calm and taking things easy.
No, it was Baku 2018 in the end.
Was it? Oh, yes, yeah, it was more like Baku 2018, definitely. Connor Walker, as always, in the chat says, "What did you guys think of the track? Honestly, don't know if it's
trash.
It should be certified, or whatever to be an F1 track. Seemed really dangerous. I think we've kind of covered that off and what we've said already, Connor. But if anyone else wants to weigh in, please do.
I thought it was all right. I think there was definitely an element of danger to it, and I was worried about things going drastically wrong. But I think as a driving challenge, the need to be accurate and consistent and hit your marks at pretty much every corner. We saw how easy it was to get it wrong for Max in qualifying. One mistake and the whole lap is blown. So it is a really good track. And once things settled down, settled down. Once people stopped crashing into the wall, it was okay. They could get around, and there was a little bit of wheel banging here and there. A little bit's putting it.
Yeah, it was generally there was a general difficulty for overtaking anywhere but turn one. You saw a little bit in other places, but not a huge amount. And I thought it was a great challenge. Watching the onboards was just phenomenal. I was angry every time they cut away from an onboard, but yeah, it's just so. I mean,
it's a roller coaster.
Motorsport is inherently dangerous. We know this.
Yeah. And
but
right. I know I joked and I said another track shit. Qualifying was amazing.
Yeah.
But what we need to remember is we have no historical data from this weekend. And the qualifying was, in part, it was so good because Verstappen was realistically about to get pole and then hit the wall. So that added an element to it that we wouldn't have had. And it's like Monaco. It's like amazing Saturday because watching the drivers on the absolute limit around a circuit like that is good to watch. But in terms of a racing circuit, I just don't think it lends itself to good racing this weekend. Even putting aside the FIA things that we've spoken about, and I'm not going to go with that again because I'll just bore people senseless. But we saw in the sort of early laps before Schumacher had his accident, we saw pretty quickly that unless you got within DRS in coming around turn 27 or whatever the detection point is, you weren't really going to overtake anywhere else, and you pretty much needed to be in DRS to get past. But even then, we were stuck in a DRS train initially.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of a racing circuit, I just don't think it lends itself to the best racing imaginable. That's not entirely the circuit's fault because I know the cars don't help, but yeah, it just doesn't lend itself to the best racing.
Yeah, I mean we had
the 22 race.
Yeah, I mean we had narrow circuits. Zandvoort is beyond narrow for Formula One cars, but it put on a decent race. And I mean, Max dominate. I mean, for whatever it's worth, I guess. I mean, it's not the greatest circuit for Formula One. I think part of the problem now is these cars are too wide. They got too many bits and pieces on them. They're not going to go back to the old days. I get it, but this track outside of turn 13, and to me, which is now they're just coming up. Oh, let's put a bank corner in everywhere now. So I bet you that'll be the next thing they do at Paul Ricard because that place is a dump. They'll just go and put a couple bank corners in there just to go and make the track not seem as monotonous and horrible. It was I get the element of danger, and that's fine. I get it. Maybe I'm softening up as I get older in my fandom, but it didn't seem like it was a racetrack. I think it was more about a circus. And that they're just driving around and holding on for dear life. I don't think it had elements of other crappy street tracks over time, whether it's been in Formula One or IndyCar or whatever. It had elements of Talladega and Daytona and NASCAR where you're just waiting for somebody to crash. And then that was before all the stupidity went on with Massey and company. But it's just unfortunate that this is where we're at. There's plenty of circuits in the States and, in England and Europe that can put on great racing that would probably put on a good show for Formula One. I think the pandemic has helped. One of the only good things that may have came from pandemic is some of these circuits either coming back or being brought into the calendar. Even Qatar to a point, for the challenge you had there. Of course, Portimao, bringing back Imola for whoever loves Imola. I haven't really been a fan of it because of Senna's, what happened with Senna. But it's you have to. You're really towing a line of this is borderline. This track is borderline, and it wasn't a good racing weekend. Yeah, if you're going to have time attack, sure. If you wanted to have single car qualifying time attack, I think it would be entertaining. But unfortunately, I don't think it was a racetrack. So
Yeah, I think we'll leave the track now. I think we've kind of covered enough on the track now.
Talked about it enough.
Yeah, Michael Gonzalez has said the post-race show said that Max deserved a 10-second penalty. Was any thoughts on that, or do you want to just leave it as it is?
No, I don't think he deserved a 10-second penalty. He had already given the position back, and we then had the restart anyway, where he'd been told to move a place back. When Michael Massey was doing his best audition for The Apprentice. Just...
Did I miss something on the 10-second penalty part? I know that there was there was so much stuff that went on. That
you got the 5 second for turn one, and apparently on the coverage, Sky F1 was saying that he should get a 10-second penalty for the incident with Hamilton on the straight.
Yeah, did the okay.
Was that also Damon Hill by any chance?
I don't know. I'm just reading.
I'm going to hazard a guess that it was Damon Hill.
Quite possibly, but
that man probably has Lewis Hamilton underwear.
Yeah, but if he does have Lewis Hamilton underwear, you can guarantee that Paul di Resta has got a voodoo doll with Lewis Hamilton's face on it, because he is always pro Red Bull, and I suppose it's nice to have that balance as well. Daddy Pig has said Lando's been unlucky since he bottled the win in Sochi. Any thoughts on that?
You didn't bottle the win in Sochi.
McLaren got his fault.
McLaren got the strategy wrong.
I go back. Oh, I'm sorry.
No. Go on, Phil.
I think when he crashed at Spa trying to go and make his hero lap, when he would have won his first race, the 11 laps that was the Belgian Grand Prix, that's when his season was the end for Lando, because at that point I think he was still in the race for third in points. And ever since then, that massive incident I think took something out of him, and it's unfortunate, really. I mean, I enjoy watching Lando drive when he's at his best, because he's a great young talent and he's funny. So I'm hoping with all the super best friends back together, he'll come back to himself. But I think that was when it's ended to me. But maybe it might have been somewhere else.
Yeah, good to see a familiar face in the chat from my podcast. Darren has not from my podcast, but someone who's frequently on my live streams. He's put, I wonder who decides which snippets of audio we get to hear and why. Any thoughts on that? I believe they just tend to go with whatever narrative they want to portray. They play the radio out that suits that narrative. But any thoughts on that?
Well, the thing is, we're more likely going to want to hear, especially with the race that we had today, we're going to want to hear Hamilton and Verstappen's radio. So you just put the show on the other foot for a moment. Imagine if we'd heard, if we just had that incident, and instead of hearing, Lewis kicking off or Max saying whatever, imagine if we'd have heard, say, Gasly say, "Oh, my battery's a bit low." You'd be sitting there going, "Why are you telling? Why are we hearing that?" So, and you always—it's the same with coverage, whether it's TV or audio or radio coverage or team radio coverage, whatever. Whatever the overriding storyline of the weekend is, and more often than not, it will be the two title protagonists. If we have two or more, that is what you're going to see more of.
Or Alonso shithousing.
Or that. Yes, I did forget about that.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Cool. So Michael Gonzalez has said it wasn't Damon Hill, by the way, that made the comment. But we'll just finish on a philosophical question from Jared Bradley. He said it's on Formula E, actually, so let's just kind of branch out. They have the rights to electric vehicle racing for something like 20 years. What will happen to F1 when Formula E surpasses them? I'll weigh on this one to start with. I don't believe Formula E will surpass Formula One, because I don't think the electric power unit has got the potential in it to go as far as the current power unit does anyway, and there'll be other forms that Formula One will take on. And Formula One, they will move to more electrification. They'll move to more power for electrification, and as long as it's hybrid, then it's fine. They can't have a fully electric engine, but they could have a little tiny motor in there that powers the dashboard light, and then it would technically be classed as a hybrid. So they could, if they wanted to, go full hybrid. And given that Formula E is not a full manufacturer sport, I don't think they will ever surpass Formula One. They may merge eventually with what Formula One do, but I don't think they will surpass them. Personal opinion, I might be completely wrong, but I'll throw that to you guys as well to discuss if you want to.
I think you're bob on.
Yeah, I think that Formula E, I mean, you look at some of the teams that are in it. Yeah, sure, there are a couple of manufacturers, but even Mercedes, we look at Mercedes as Formula One. Well, they just won the Formula E World Championship. Nick de Vries is Formula E World Champion. They're leaving after this coming season. So what does that say about where they want to be? Do they want to be, they talked about electrification, but they don't want to be a part of it. Audi left. BMW left, and Audi, BMW, Mercedes. I mean, I don't think Mercedes, but definitely Audi and BMW are going to the World Endurance Championship, and the unification of the main prototype class there. So maybe the question should be: are we going to be back to the late '80s of Formula? What is it? The World Endurance Championship, where they were the elite. Had all the big factory people, and then Formula One decided and FIA started changing regs so that they could get all these manufacturers to come into Formula One. Are we going back that way? I don't think Formula E, it has its spot. It's a niche. It's interesting. It's a place for former Formula One drivers and guys who never got their shot in Formula One to go. It has its place. It does its job. It does a thing in the off season, even though they take way too much time between races. It should definitely start like a week or two after. Basically, now in this case, you started just before Christmas, like the week before Christmas. You have a couple weeks off during New Year, and then after that, you should be flowing with your calendar. I don't understand why they don't do it that way. Tom, you know better than me, probably. Tom Horrox, but but the fact of the matter is, Formula E is never going to overtake Formula One, in large part because the FIA will never let that happen. Number one, and number two, because when you have the likes of Ferrari, and then you add Mercedes, McLaren, Red Bull, and the like, it's just not going to happen. The Formula One has always stood the test of time during all kinds of issues that have gone on in the world, even though now they just go to places where they have dictators. But in this case, Formula E is never going to overtake Formula One.
Yeah. We'll just finish with a couple of bits of news I've just spotted on Twitter. Still nothing on the on Max Verstappen and any potential penalties, but there's no further action for Leclerc and Perez. And the most important thing is Théo Pourchaire has tweeted to say that he's okay. He may not be fit for the last race of the season, but he's okay globally, and that Enzo is injured. I think that's the most important. It is not that this was really big one, and Enzo is injured. I wish him the very best recovery possible. I read that as not injured, which is why I said it was good news. So apologies if that offended anyone. But yeah, so Théo Pourchaire is okay. Enzo is injured, but we don't have a news on that specifically. But wish him the best of recovery, obviously, in that scary incident. So I'll stop the live stream there. Thank you once again, guys, for sticking around.